The ancient key felt impossibly heavy in Olivia Morgan's frozen fingers as she stood before the snow-shrouded cabin. Wind howled through the pines, driving needles of ice against her tear-stained face. Her expensive city boots, never meant for this wilderness, were soaked through, her toes numb beyond feeling. Behind her, tire tracks were already disappearing under fresh powder, the taxi driver eager to escape before the mountain pass closed completely. Only the faint glow of her phone illuminated the weathered door. 3% battery remaining. No service. No one knew she was here. 48 hours ago, she had been Olivia Morgan Westfield, successful architect's wife, admired hostess, fixture of Boston society. Now she was just Olivia, homeless in a blizzard, clutching a lawyer's letter about an inheritance from a great-aunt she'd never met. What struck onlookers at the reading of Mason Westfield's new will wasn't Olivia's disheveled appearance or the bruise darkening her cheekbone. It was her expression as she watched her husband of 11 years standing beside his pregnant executive assistant, Vanessa. While their friends averted their eyes in embarrassment, while Mason smirked in triumph at legally securing everything they'd built together, Olivia wasn't crying. She wasn't angry. She was smiling. A small, knowing smile that suggested she understood something fundamental that everyone else in the room had missed. As the key finally turned in the frozen lock and the cabin door swung open with a ghostly creak, Olivia stepped across the threshold. Into pitch darkness. The beam of her dying phone revealed cobwebs, dust, and something glinting on a far wall, something that caught the light like a beacon. She moved toward it, unaware that she was crossing more than just a room. She was crossing from her past life into something entirely unexpected, something that would change everything. 5 years earlier, Olivia Chen stood at the center of the Westfield Gallery's grand opening, her camera forgotten around her neck, as Mason raised a champagne flute in her direction. "To my muse, my better half," he announced to the crowd of Boston's elite, his voice carrying effortlessly across the renovated warehouse space. "Without Olivia's eye for beauty, I would never have discovered half the artists on these walls. She has a gift for seeing what others miss." The assembled guests, art critics, wealthy collectors, city officials, applauded politely. Olivia felt her cheeks warm with the familiar mixture of pride and discomfort that always accompanied Mason's public praise. Before meeting him, she had been a promising photographer herself, her stark black-and-white urban landscapes beginning to attract attention in smaller galleries. Now, her artistic vision served primarily to advance her husband's rapidly growing empire of high-end art spaces. Later that night, as they moved through their sleek Beacon Hill brownstone preparing for bed, Mason loosened his tie with a satisfied sigh. Carmichael committed to the Nakamura series. 7 figures. He grinned, pulling her close. "Your suggestion, your eye." Olivia leaned into his embrace, inhaling the familiar scent of his cologne. "The Nakamura pieces are extraordinary. Anyone would see that." "Not anyone. You." His fingers traced the line of her collarbone. "We're going to be unstoppable, Liv. 2 more years, and I can open the Shanghai Gallery, then Paris." She nodded against his chest, pushing away the whisper of regret that sometimes visited in these moments. She had set aside her own exhibition, plans when they married, telling herself it was temporary, just until Mason established himself, just until things settled. But success had bred more success, expansion following expansion, and somehow 3 years had stretched to 5. Her cameras gathered dust while she scoured obscure studios for talent that would enhance the Westfield brand. "I was thinking," she ventured, "about that small space on Newbury Street, the one that's closing next month. It might work for a small photography showcase for the Emerging Artists program." "Brilliant idea." Mason kissed her forehead. "We could feature those Vietnamese street photographers you discovered." Actually, I was thinking of a more personal project. Olivia pulled back slightly to meet his eyes. Some of my work. Just a small exhibition. Something flickered across Mason's expression, surprise, maybe concern, before his smile returned. Your work is outstanding, Liv. Always has been. But is that the best use of your talents right now? We're at a critical expansion point. He moved to the bathroom, voice raised slightly over the running water. Besides, you're Olivia Westfield now, the tastemaker, the curator. Stepping back to show your own work might seem regressive. The words stung more than he could know. Regressive, as though reclaiming her artistic voice would be moving backward rather than forward. But Mason's logic, as always, was impeccable. The Westfield brand was what mattered. Their shared vision, their partnership. By morning, she had shelved the idea again. The Westfield Gallery's meteoric rise continued. Mason's instinct for trends, combined with Olivia's genuine eye for undiscovered talent, proved unbeatable. They traveled constantly. Milan, Tokyo, Berlin, acquiring pieces and cultivating relationships with artists and collectors alike. Their home filled with exquisite objects, each with a story, each representing another success. At their 10th anniversary celebration, hosted at the Museum of Fine Arts, where Mason had recently been appointed to the board, Olivia wore a custom Valentino and accepted compliments with practiced grace. Yet she felt increasingly like one of the carefully curated objects in their home, valued, displayed, but somehow hollow. You two are the perfect power couple, gushed Elise Hammond, wife of Mason's attorney. He with the business acumen, you with the artistic soul. Tell me, Olivia, will we ever see your photography exhibited? I remember those haunting cityscapes from years ago. Before she could answer, Mason appeared at her side, hand possessively at the small of her back. Olivia's contribution to the art world has evolved beyond her own work, he explained smoothly. She's elevated dozens of artists who might never have been discovered otherwise. How selfless, Elise murmured, eyes slightly narrowed. That night, alone in their bedroom while Mason concluded business calls, Olivia opened her laptop and navigated to a folder she rarely accessed. Her photographs, hundreds of them, unseen by anyone in years. Street scenes, abstract compositions, intimate portraits, each capturing moments of raw truth. Her finger hovered over one image, an elderly man feeding pigeons in the public garden, his face a map of loneliness and contentment simultaneously. She remembered the moment perfectly, the quality of light, the decision to shoot in black and white, the gentle request for permission that led to a 2-hour conversation with a widower named Harold, who had once been a concert pianist. That connection, that human exchange, had once been the heart of her art. Still awake? Mason's voice startled her. She closed the laptop quickly. Just checking emails, she lied, unsure why she felt the need to hide her past from him. Mason slid into bed beside her, expression unusually serious. I've been thinking about your family's property in Vermont, the one your mother mentioned at Christmas. Olivia blinked in surprise. Her mother's passing comment about a distant relative's abandoned cabin had barely registered. What about it? Your mother said it might eventually come to you through some distant great-aunt's will. He traced patterns on her arm. If it does, we should sell immediately. Vermont real estate is appreciating, and we could use the capital for the European expansion. I don't even know this relative, Olivia said. The cabin probably doesn't exist, or if it does, it's falling apart. Mason pressed a kiss to her shoulder. Just something to keep in mind. No reason to hold on to a dilapidated cabin in the middle of nowhere, is there? No, she agreed, though something about his interest felt odd. No reason at all. She couldn't have known then how significant that casual exchange would become. Couldn't have imagined that within 5 years everything, her marriage, her identity, her understanding of truth itself, would shatter like fine crystal dropped on marble. or that a dilapidated cabin in the middle of nowhere would become her only refuge in the world. The first signs of trouble appeared so gradually that Olivia almost missed them. A declined credit card at her favorite boutique, Mason's increasingly frequent late nights, subtle changes in the Westfield Gallery's accounting practices that she glimpsed when helping organize year-end reports. Just market fluctuations, Mason assured her, when she noticed several high-value pieces had been sold well below their appraised value. Tax strategies you wouldn't understand. That phrase, "you wouldn't understand," had begun to punctuate their conversations with alarming frequency. It created invisible walls between them, cordoning off entire areas of their shared business as territory she wasn't welcome to question. On a frigid February morning, Olivia sat across from Diane Cho, who had been her closest friend since college, in a quiet corner of their usual brunch spot. "Something's wrong with the gallery finances," Olivia confided, stirring her untouched coffee, "and Mason won't discuss it." Diane frowned, her sharp legal mind already analyzing. Before becoming a corporate attorney, she had volunteered at an arts advocacy non-profit where she and Olivia had met. What kind of discrepancies are we talking about? Pieces selling for less than valuation, investors pulled from the Tokyo expansion without explanation, and there's a holding company I've never heard of that suddenly owns half our inventory. Have you checked your personal accounts? Diane's voice lowered. Your name is on the business, Liv. If there's financial impropriety, Mason would never do anything illegal, Olivia interrupted, loyalty overriding her concerns. He's just protective about business details. Diane reached across the table, her grip surprisingly firm on Olivia's wrist. Promise me you'll verify your financial situation today. The unease that had been simmering for months crystallized into something colder as Olivia drove home through swirling snow. She remembered her mother's warnings before the wedding. Artists and businessmen see the world differently, Olivia. Make sure you protect yourself. At the time, she had dismissed it as her mother's typical caution. Now, she wasn't so sure. The brownstone was silent when she returned. Mason was at a collector's lunch, not expected back for hours. Perfect timing. She settled at his desk, opened his laptop, and paused at the password prompt. For 10 years of marriage, Mason had used the same password. Her birthday, followed by the day they met. She typed it in automatically. Access denied. She tried 3 more variations before accepting that Mason had changed his password without telling her. A small betrayal that somehow felt enormous. Olivia moved to the filing cabinet instead, pulling financial statements, property records, anything that might illuminate their true position. 2 hours later, surrounded by papers, she sat in stunned silence, pieces clicking into place with devastating clarity. The Westfield Gallery was in financial freefall, but their personal accounts, or what should have been their joint accounts, told a different story. Mason had systematically transferred assets to offshore holdings, removed her name from properties, and established a separate financial identity entirely. Most devastating of all, she found divorce papers, already drafted, waiting only for his signature. The front door opened, sending a blast of cold air through the house. Mason's footsteps in the hallway, then silence as he reached the office doorway. His expression shifted from surprise to cold fury as he surveyed the papers surrounding her. Going through my personal files? His voice was eerily calm. That's beneath you, Olivia. Beneath me? She stood, a document clutched in her trembling hand. Like discovering my husband has been planning to divorce me while systematically ensuring I'll be left with nothing. It's not personal. Mason stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. It's business. The gallery is failing. Bad. Investments, market downturns. I've had to protect what I can. What you can, Olivia's voice rose. Everything we built was together. My eye, my connections, my work. Your work? Mason laughed, a sound devoid of humor. When was the last time you actually created anything, Olivia? You've been living off my success, enjoying the lifestyle I provide, while contributing what? Occasional opinions about lighting? Each word landed like a physical blow. The worst part was the grain of truth buried in his cruelty. She had stopped. Her creating had sublimated her artistic voice to his vision. I gave up my career for you, she whispered. No one asked you to. Mason loosened his scarf, suddenly businesslike. Look, the market's been brutal. I've made arrangements to protect our core assets. When things stabilize, I'll no longer be your wife. She held up the divorce filing. These are dated 3 months ago, Mason. Outside, the snow had intensified, wind howling against the windows. The weather matched the storm building inside her. Vanessa is pregnant, he said finally, not meeting her eyes. It wasn't planned, but there it is. The world tilted sickeningly. Vanessa, his assistant, the woman who had been in their home, shared meals at their table. The betrayal was so complete, so breathtaking in its scope, that Olivia could only stare. How long? She managed. Does it matter? Mason moved to the bar cart, poured himself a scotch with steady hands. The gallery needs restructuring. This marriage has run its course. You'll be provided for within reason. Within reason. Olivia's shock crystallized into rage. I am the Westfield Gallery. Those artists trusted me, not you. Those relationships are because of my integrity. Your integrity won't matter when the lawsuits start. Mason's voice hardened. Several pieces we sold last year have provenance issues. Your precious integrity would be the first casualty if this goes public. Olivia stared at him, this stranger wearing her husband's face. You sold forgeries. I sold what needed to be sold to keep us afloat. He drained his glass. I need you to sign some paperwork tonight, transfer documents for the properties. Then it would be best if you stayed with a friend while the lawyers finalize everything. It's a blizzard outside, she said numbly, gesturing toward the window where snow now fell in blinding sheets. Mason shrugged. Call an Uber. Call Diane. I need you gone before morning. Vanessa is moving in tomorrow. Something broke inside Olivia, not her heart, which had been fracturing slowly for years, but the chains of loyalty and self-doubt that had kept her tethered to this man. I'm not signing anything. She began gathering specific documents, moving with newfound purpose. And you can explain to the IRS why you've been selling forgeries through a gallery bearing my family name. Mason moved with unexpected speed, grabbing her arm with bruising force. Don't threaten me, Olivia. You have no idea what you're dealing with. As his fingers dug into her flesh, the last illusion shattered. This man was not just a failed businessman or an unfaithful husband. He was dangerous. Let go of me, her voice was iced. Now! Instead, he tightened his grip, his face contorted with a rage she had never witnessed. You will sign the papers tonight. You will leave quietly, or I will destroy what remains of your reputation so thoroughly you'll never work in any creative. Afield again. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed 7 times as they stood locked in this moment of truth, snow falling relentlessly outside, burying the world they had built together. Olivia pulled free of Mason's grasp, a strange calm settling over her despite the thundering of her heart. 11 years of marriage had dissolved in minutes, revealing a stranger where her husband had been. I'll get my things, she said quietly. Just essentials. Mason's voice was clipped, professional. The rest can be dealt with through lawyers. Upstairs, Olivia moved methodically through their bedroom, mind racing beneath her controlled exterior. The documents she'd seen revealed catastrophic financial mismanagement, possible fraud. Mason had gambled everything on high-risk investments that failed. spectacularly. Now he was scrambling to hide assets, their assets, while using Vanessa and her pregnancy as convenient cover for the divorce. She packed a suitcase with practical items, warm clothes, toiletries, her grandmother's jade pendant, the external hard drive containing her photography portfolio. From her jewelry box, she removed only pieces from her family. The expensive gifts from Mason could fuel his legal defense. She had no intention of being part of it. The doorbell rang as she zipped the suitcase closed. Voices drifted up the stairs. Mason's and another man's, legal papers being delivered despite the worsening storm. Time was running out. On impulse, she slid open the false bottom of her jewelry box where she kept important personal documents, her birth certificate, passport, her mother's handwritten recipes. Beneath them was a letter she'd almost forgotten, delivered after her mother's funeral 3 years ago, to be opened only in time of greatest need, her mother's handwriting, elegant and precise. Now certainly qualified as greatest need, she broke the seal and unfolded the single page. My dearest Olivia, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and you find yourself in dire circumstances. I've always worried about the imbalance in your marriage, your willingness to dim your light for Mason's glory. I pray I'm wrong, but mothers sense these things. What Mason doesn't know, your great-aunt Eleanor's cabin and the surrounding 50 acres are yours alone. I established the trust in your maiden name. The property can never be part of marital assets. The key is with Huang at the old shop. The cabin holds secrets Mason has always suspected but never confirmed. Trust your eye. See what others miss. With eternal love, Mom Olivia stared at the letter, pieces clicking into place. Mason's odd questions about the Vermont property years ago, his insistence that she sell immediately if she inherited it. He had known something, or suspected. Footsteps on the stairs jolted her back to the present. She tucked the letter into her coat pocket and composed her face into a mask of defeat. "The papers are ready," Mason announced from the doorway. "Simple property transfers. Sign them and this can remain civilized." Olivia glanced at the thick stack of documents. "I'll need to review them with my lawyer." Mason's carefully cultivated patience slipped. "There's no time for that. Sign them now or what?" She interrupted, a new steel in her voice. "You'll physically force me. Add assault to fraud." His face darkened. "You have no idea what's at stake." "I understand exactly what's at stake, for both of us." She hefted her suitcase. "I'll have my lawyer contact yours tomorrow." The man standing in her bedroom, their bedroom, transformed before her eyes, all pretense of civility evaporating. "You sign these papers now, or I swear to God, Olivia, you'll leave this house with nothing but the clothes on your back." She set down the suitcase, hands steady despite her fear. "I've given you 11 years, Mason. My talent, my connections, my reputation. I'm not giving you anything more tonight." What happened next occurred with such sudden violence that Olivia barely had time to register it. Mason lunged forward, grabbing the suitcase, and hurled it down the stairs. The crash echoed through the house as clothes and possessions scattered across the marble foyer. "Get out!" His voice was terrifyingly quiet. "Now!" Olivia stood frozen, shock giving way to a primal understanding that she was no longer safe here. She grabbed her coat and purse, edging past him without turning her back. "This isn't over," she said. "It was over the moment you chose defiance over cooperation." Mason followed her down the stairs, watching as she salvaged what she could from the scattered contents of her suitcase. "You have 5 minutes before I call the police and report an intruder." Outside, the blizzard had intensified. Wind howled between buildings, snow falling so heavily she could barely see the street. Olivia fumbled with her phone, fingers numb with cold and shock, requesting a rideshare that kept cancelling due to weather conditions. Finally, a driver accepted, estimating 20 minutes in the storm. She couldn't wait on the doorstep. Not with Mason watching from the window, not with the temperature plummeting. Clutching her hastily repacked bag, Olivia trudged toward the corner cafe that stayed open late. Each step through the knee-deep snow was an effort, the wind stealing her breath, her tears freezing on her cheeks. The cafe was closing early due to weather, but the barista took one look at Olivia's face and ushered her inside. "You can wait until your ride comes. God, you're freezing." A hot tea appeared before her, the barista discreetly turning away as Olivia struggled to control her shaking hands. Her phone chimed with a message from the driver. "Cannot reach your location. Streets closed by emergency services. Stranded in a historic blizzard with nowhere to go. Do you need me to call someone?" the barista asked gently. Olivia scrolled through her contacts, reality sinking in. Her closest friends were Mason's friends too, their loyalty uncertain. Hotels would be full with stranded travelers. Diane was in New York for a conference. Then, her eyes fell on a name she hadn't contacted in years. Wei Huang, her mother's oldest friend, who ran an antique shop on the outskirts of Chinatown, who, according to her mother's letter, had a key for her. "I need to get to Pearl Street," she told the barista. "Is that possible?" The young woman grimaced. "Not by car, but the blue line is still running. Limited service, but it'll get you close." Half. An hour later, Olivia emerged from the subway into swirling snow, navigating by memory to the small shop wedged between newer buildings. "Huang Antiquities," the weathered sign proclaimed. By some miracle, lights still glowed in the windows. The bell jingled as she pushed open the door, warmth and the scent of jasmine tea enveloping her. Behind the counter, an elderly man glanced up, recognition blooming on his face. "Olivia Chen," he said, using her maiden name. "Your mother said you would come one day. You remember me?" She hadn't visited in at least 5 years. Wei Huang smiled. "You have her eyes, the photographer's eyes that see truth." He studied her face. "Tonight is the night, then?" Unable to speak, she simply nodded. Without further questions, he disappeared into a back room, returning with a small wooden box. "She left this for you, said you would know when it was time." Inside the box lay an ornate iron key, a folded map, and a small jade pendant matching the one she already wore, its twin. Beneath these was an envelope containing a substantial amount of cash and a handwritten note with an address in Vermont. "My mother," Olivia began, voice breaking. "She feared for you," Wei said simply. "Not at first, but later, when you stopped taking photographs, when your voice became his echo, she made arrangements." Olivia clutched the box, fresh tears threatening. "I have nowhere to go tonight." "The storm, you will stay here," he said firmly. "Tomorrow, when the plows have cleared the roads, I will help you reach the bus station." "Bus station?" Wei nodded toward the map. "To Vermont, to the cabin. It is time you claim your inheritance, Olivia Chen. Time you reclaim your sight." As if to punctuate his words, the lights flickered once, twice, then steadied. A city on the edge of darkness, a life on the precipice of transformation. Outside, the storm raged on, burying the past beneath pristine white, creating a blank canvas for what would come next. 3 days after the storm paralyzed Boston, Olivia stood on an unmarked road in rural Vermont, watching as the ancient Greyhound, a bus that had delivered her, disappeared around a snow-covered bend. The silence that followed was absolute. No traffic, no city sounds, only the occasional creak of snow-laden branches and her own anxious breathing. According to the weathered map Wei had given her, the cabin lay 2 miles down this road, nestled against the edge of state forest land. The old man had pressed a sturdy backpack into her hands before she'd boarded the bus, filled with practical supplies. A flashlight, matches, non-perishable food, a thermal blanket, and a satellite phone for emergencies only. The ancient flip phone seemed absurdly outdated, but Wei had assured her it would work where modern smartphones couldn't. Your mother was a planner, he'd said with sad wisdom. She saw darkness gathering long before the storm broke. Now, trudging through snow that reached mid-calf in places, Olivia had time to wonder exactly what her mother had foreseen. How long had Eleanor Chen watched her daughter's marriage with quiet concern? How many years had she prepared this escape route while saying nothing? The wilderness surrounding her bore little resemblance to the manicured landscapes of Beacon Hill. Here, nature ruled unchallenged. Evergreens heavy with snow, skeletal deciduous trees creaking in the wind, animal tracks crisscrossing the pristine white blanket. In Boston, she had been Olivia Westfield, the gallerist's wife. Here, she was a solitary figure in an indifferent landscape, her designer boots already soaked through, her cashmere coat inadequate against the penetrating cold. An hour into her trek, doubt began to gnaw at her resolve. What if the cabin was uninhabitable? What if she couldn't find it at all? Her phone showed no service, and darkness would fall early in these mountains. Just as panic threatened to overwhelm her, the trees thinned, revealing a small clearing. And there, partially obscured by untrimmed pines, stood a structure that could generously be called a cabin. In reality, it was little more than a large shed with a steep roof, its weathered cedar siding silvered with age, windows shuttered against the elements. Smoke curled from a stone chimney, an impossibility that stopped Olivia in her tracks. Someone was already there. Caution warred with necessity as she approached. Through a gap in the shutters, warm light flickered, firelight, not electric. Whoever occupied her inheritance was using the fireplace. The ancient key felt heavy in her pocket as she climbed 3 snow-covered steps to a small porch. Before she could decide whether to knock or simply unlock the door, asserting her ownership, it swung open. A woman in her 70s stood framed in the doorway, silver hair pulled back in a practical braid, face weathered by decades of mountain living. She held a shotgun with the casual comfort of long familiarity. "You must be Chen's girl," the woman said, eyes sharp beneath grey brows. "About time you showed up." Olivia struggled to find her voice. "This cabin belongs to my great-aunt Eleanor. Eleanor's been dead 30 years. The woman lowered the shotgun, but didn't set it aside. "This place came to your mother, who never wanted it, and now to you, who never knew about it until you needed it. I'm Ruth Blackwood. I've been caretaking this property since before you were born." The blunt assessment left Olivia speechless. Ruth stepped back, gesturing for her to enter. "Better come in before you freeze. We've got things to discuss." The cabin's interior defied its humble exterior. Though small, perhaps 30 feet square, it was meticulously organized. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, its crackling fire the only source of heat. Opposite stood a compact kitchen with an old wood stove. A ladder led to a sleeping loft beneath steep eaves, and a small sitting area with 2 well-worn armchairs faced the fire. What struck Olivia most was the absence of electricity. Oil lamps cast a warm glow, and a hand pump over a stone sink suggested no running water. Yet despite these rustic conditions, the space felt intentional, even elegant in its simplicity. "Sit," Ruth gestured to one of the armchairs. "You look dead on your feet." Olivia sank gratefully into the chair, warmth from the fire beginning to thaw her frozen extremities. "You said you're the caretaker. 52 years now." Ruth busied herself at the wood stove, filling a kettle. "Your great-aunt hired me when I was just 20. When she passed, your mother kept me on, even though she never visited. Said someone needed to watch over what was hidden here." "Hidden?" Olivia leaned forward. "What's hidden here?" Ruth's weathered face revealed nothing. "That depends on who's asking and why. Your mother said you'd come only if things went bad with that husband of yours. So they did." The directness of the question caught Olivia off guard. "He's been dishonest about many things." Men generally are. Ruth placed a steaming mug in Olivia's hands, tea with something stronger mixed in that burned pleasantly down her throat. Mason Westfield has been trying to find this place for 8 years, sent representatives with offers to buy, hired surveyors who mysteriously got lost, even tried bribing the county records office. Olivia nearly choked on her tea. Mason tried to find this cabin before we were even married. Oh, yes. Ruth settled into the opposite chair with her own mug. He wanted what's here. Still does, I expect. But what could possibly... Not what. Who? Ruth held Olivia's gaze. Your great-aunt Eleanor Chen, the work she did, the records she kept. For the first time, Olivia took proper notice of the walls. What she had assumed were decorative hangings were in fact photographs. Dozens of them carefully preserved behind glass. Black and white images of landscapes, buildings, people. The style was distinctive, the composition masterful. Eleanor was a photographer? Olivia stood, moving closer to examine them. One of the first female photojournalists to document the war in Vietnam. Before that, she covered the civil rights movement. After government corruption cases, Ruth watched Olivia's face carefully. Your mother never told you about her? She mentioned a great aunt who traveled. Nothing about photography. Olivia moved from image to image, recognizing the technical, a brilliance, the perfect capturing of decisive moments. These are museum quality. Several are in museums, under different names. Ruth rose with a grunt, crossing to a large cedar chest tucked beneath the window. Eleanor made powerful enemies, photographed things some people preferred, undocumented. When threats became too serious, she retreated here, continued working under pseudonyms. She lifted the chest's heavy lid, revealing dozens of leather-bound journals, folders of negatives, and stacks of photographs. This is her archive, unpublished work documenting 7 decades of American secrets, including... Ruth extracted a particular folder, the Westfield family's less reputable business dealings. Olivia's heart stuttered. Mason's family? 3 generations of art world fraud, theft of indigenous artifacts, laundering money for certain interests. Ruth handed her the folder. Your husband wasn't the first Westfield to profit from deception, just the first foolish enough to marry the great niece of the woman who documented it all. Olivia opened the folder with trembling hands, confronting images from the 1970s, Mason's father shaking hands with men she recognized from history books, artifacts changing hands, documents being signed. Mason never knew who I was related to, she whispered. It's impossible. Is it? Ruth's gaze was piercing. Did you ever wonder why, of all the promising young photographers in Boston, he pursued you so relentlessly? Why he encouraged you to abandon your own work, why he kept you close but diminished? As darkness fell completely outside, Olivia sank back into the chair. Eleanor's photographs spread across her lap. Evidence of a past she never knew, and a husband whose interest in her may never have been about love at all. Morning light filtered through the cabin's shuttered windows, casting geometric patterns across Olivia's face as she awoke in the loft. For a disorienting moment, she reached for the silk sheets of her Boston bedroom before reality crashed back. The divorce, the storm, the cabin, the revelation. Below, she could hear Ruth moving about, the clank of the wood stove being stoked, the homey scent of coffee brewing. Olivia had barely slept, spending hours poring over Eleanor's photographs and journals by lamplight until exhaustion finally claimed her. She descended the ladder to find Ruth setting out a simple breakfast of oatmeal and dried fruit. You look like you've seen ghosts, Ruth observed, pouring coffee into a chipped enamel mug. I have. Olivia accepted the coffee gratefully. My entire marriage feels like a lie now. Ruth's expression softened slightly, the first crack in her stoic demeanor. Not everything between you was false, I'd wager. Men like Westfield are complicated. He could have genuine feelings for you while still pursuing his family's interests. That's almost worse. Olivia stared into her coffee. It means he compartmentalized, loved the woman while betraying her. After breakfast, Ruth showed Olivia around the property. Despite heavy snow, they trudged to a second, smaller structure behind the cabin, a purpose-built darkroom where Eleanor had processed her film and printed her exposés. She was meticulous, Ruth explained, gesturing to walls lined with filing cabinets. Every negative catalogued, every print documented. The journals connect the images to names, dates, locations. A complete record. Olivia ran her fingers across the dusty equipment, enlargers, developing trays, chemical bottles with faded labels. A photographer's sanctuary, preserved like a time capsule. Did my mother know about all this? Ruth nodded. Eleanor told her. Everything before she died. Your mother chose to stay away, felt the knowledge was too dangerous, but she maintained the trust, paid me to keep watch, and made sure you'd have somewhere to go if things went sideways. But why wouldn't she warn me about Mason? Olivia struggled to reconcile her mother's silence with such elaborate precautions. Would you have believed her? Ruth's question hung in the cold air. A mother's warnings about a charming man. Most daughters would chalk it up to overprotection. The truth of this struck Olivia like a physical blow. Would she have listened, or would she have defended Mason, chosen him over her mother's concerns? She already knew the answer. Back in the cabin, they spread Eleanor's documentation about the Westfields across the table, photographs spanning from the 1960s through the 1990s. It started with Mason's grandfather, Thomas Westfield, Ruth explained. He established the gallery after World War II, specializing in recovering European art that had been lost during the war. The photographs told the story. Thomas Westfield meeting with known art thieves, documentation falsified, masterpieces with questionable provenance appearing in Westfield Gallery exhibitions. His son, Richard, Mason's father, expanded into indigenous artifacts, grave robbing, essentially. Ruth pointed to images of ceremonial objects being packed into Westfield crates. Museums were desperate for these collections. They didn't ask too many questions about how they were acquired. Olivia recognized some of the pieces from the Westfield family home where Mason had grown up. Items she had admired, touching their ancient surfaces, never knowing they had been stolen from sacred sites. And Mason, she asked, dreading the answer. Ruth extracted more recent files. Eleanor was in declining health by the time Mason entered the business, but she'd trained others. These came from a photographer who continued her work. The images were fewer but more damning. Mason meeting with the same connected figures his father and grandfather had worked with, now in modern settings. Hotel lobbies, private airfields. The dates on several coincided with his international acquisition trips. He's been selling forgeries, Olivia said quietly. I found evidence of it before I left, pieces with documented provenance that weren't what they claimed to be. Ruth nodded grimly. The Westfield business model evolved. Art markets became more regulated, harder to fool, so they adapted. Genuine pieces with false provenance in one direction, forgeries with impeccable documentation in the other. Olivia's mind raced back through a decade of exhibitions, sales to museums and collectors who trusted the Westfield name, trusted her judgment and integrity by extension. I'm complicit, she whispered. I vouched for these works. You were a tool, not an accomplice, Ruth corrected firmly. There's a difference. Nevertheless, the revelation sickened her. How many times had she assured a hesitant collector that a piece's provenance was solid? How many museum acquisitions had gone through on her recommendation? The magnitude of the fraud and her unwitting role in it was staggering. Mason's recent financial troubles, Olivia mused, thinking aloud. Could they be related to this? Most likely. Ruth poured more coffee. These schemes work until they don't. Someone asks the wrong question, examines the wrong piece too carefully, then it unravels quickly. Which explained Mason's desperation to transfer assets, to divorce her swiftly, to start fresh with a clean slate, and Vanessa as both cover and new beginning. As evening approached, Olivia sat before the fire, Eleanor's journals open beside her. The older woman's handwriting was precise, her observations razor-sharp. She documented not just the Westfield's activities, but dozens of powerful figures engaged in various forms of corruption: politicians, business leaders, celebrities. Eleanor believed in accountability, Ruth said, settling into the opposite chair. Not vengeance, but truth. She believed sunlight was the best disinfectant. What would she do in my position? Olivia asked. Ruth considered this. She would be strategic, patient. She'd gather evidence, build a comprehensive case, and release it when it would do the most good and cause the least collateral damage to innocent people. Innocent people. Like the artists whose work Mason had sold, who would be devastated to learn their creations were linked to fraud. Like the museums whose reputations would suffer through association. Like Vanessa, who might be both accomplice and victim in Mason's schemes. I need to know more, Olivia decided, about current operations, about Mason's recent activities. These historical records are damning, but I need to connect them to what's happening now. Ruth's eyes gleamed with approval. Now you're thinking like Eleanor. That night, after Ruth had retired to her small room off the kitchen, Olivia continued, reading through Eleanor's journals. In one from 1981, a passage caught her attention. The moral challenge of documentation is not in capturing wrongdoing. That part is straightforward. The challenge lies in understanding the complete picture before exposing any part of it. Partial truths can be more dangerous than comfortable lies. I've learned to wait, to watch, to build the narrative carefully before sharing it with the world. Patience is not complicity, it's responsibility. Olivia closed the journal, a plan beginning to form in her mind. She would not rush to expose Mason out of anger or hurt. She would approach this as Eleanor would, methodically gathering evidence, understanding the full scope of the operation, and ensuring that when justice came, it would be comprehensive. From her bag, she withdrew her camera, the professional, one she had gradually stopped using as Mason's influence grew. The familiar weight of it in her hands felt like reconnecting with a lost part of herself. Eleanor had documented corruption through her lens. Perhaps Olivia would reclaim her own voice the same way. 3 weeks passed in the mountain isolation, transforming Olivia in ways both subtle and profound. The woman who had arrived, city-polished, emotionally shattered, physically soft, was disappearing. In her place emerged someone more reminiscent of Eleanor than Olivia had ever imagined possible. Her hands, once manicured to perfection, now bore calluses from chopping wood and carrying water. Her designer clothes hung untouched while she adopted Ruth's practical layers. Most significantly, her eye, her photographer's eye that Mason had gradually dimmed, reawakened with startling intensity. Each dawn found her trudging through snow with Eleanor's old Leica, documenting the winter landscape, light and shadow playing across pristine expanses. Each evening, she developed the film in the darkroom, the familiar chemical scents reconnecting her to a self she had nearly lost. "You've got her gift," Ruth observed, watching Olivia arrange prints across the cabin floor. "The ability to reveal truth through composition." Meanwhile, Olivia's strategic mind worked ceaselessly. Using the satellite phone sparingly to avoid detection, she contacted Diane. "I thought you were dead." Her friend's voice crackled through the connection. "Mason filed a missing persons report after the storm." Olivia absorbed this news calmly. "What else is he saying?" "That you had a breakdown, that you've been unstable since the accident." He's playing the concerned husband while legally dismantling everything with your name on it, and people believe him. Diane's bitter laugh answered before her words. Most do. He's very convincing, and Vanessa makes a sympathetic pregnant partner. But not everyone's fooled. This gave Olivia her opening. I need someone I can trust inside the gallery, someone who can document what's happening now. The silence stretched uncomfortably before Diane responded. Marcus, the new assistant curator. He's been troubled by some of the authentication procedures. I can make an introduction. Olivia remembered Marcus, earnest, meticulous, with a conservation background that would make him particularly sensitive to provenance issues. Tell him I need photographs, shipping records, client communications, anything showing current practices. This is about more than your divorce, isn't it? Diane's lawyer instincts surfaced. Much more, Olivia confirmed. I'll explain when I can. That night, she outlined her plan for Ruth, who listened with growing approval. Eleanor would be proud, the older woman said finally. You're not just exposing them, you're creating a bulletproof case. I need to be thorough, Olivia spread out her notes. When this breaks, the entire Westfield operation needs to be dismantled. No escape routes. The following week brought a padded envelope, delivered to the nearest post office, Ruth collecting it on her weekly supply run. Inside were dozens of photographs and documents from Marcus, cataloguing disturbing patterns at the gallery, duplicate provenance papers for different works, restoration techniques disguising modern materials in supposedly antique pieces, coded communications about special handling for certain clients. Most damning was evidence that Mason was liquidating assets at an alarming rate, preparing for something imminent. He's planning to disappear, Olivia realized. Once Vanessa delivers the baby, they'll leave the country. The gallery will collapse, investors and clients will be left holding worthless forgeries, and Mason will resurface elsewhere with a new identity. Ruth studied the evidence, her weathered face grim. Then our timeline has shortened. You have perhaps 2 months before he vanishes. That night, Olivia called Michael Ravner, an investigative journalist whose exposés on Artworld corruption had earned both accolades and enemies. She had met him years earlier at a gallery opening, impressed by his unwillingness to accept superficial answers. I have a story, she told him simply. 3 generations of fraud, theft, and forgery, documented across 6 decades, plus evidence. It's ongoing. His interest was immediate. Why bring this to me? Olivia watched snow falling outside the cabin window, thinking of Eleanor's lifetime of careful documentation. Because some stories need to be told by people who understand the difference between justice and revenge. Michael Ravner arrived at the cabin during a late March thaw, navigating the muddy access road in a weathered jeep. His reputation preceded him, relentless, meticulous, with an uncanny ability to distill complex financial crimes into compelling narratives that demanded accountability. I expected something more dramatic, he remarked, surveying the modest cabin, given what you described over the phone. Olivia led him to the darkroom where she had organized the evidence, walls now covered with a timeline spanning from Thomas Westfield's post-war activities to Mason's current operations, photographs connected to ledgers, connected to correspondence, a visual map of decades of fraud. Ravner stood motionless, absorbing the scope. This is comprehensive. My great-aunt believed in thoroughness. Olivia indicated Eleanor's journals. Everything is documented, cross-referenced, verified. For 2 days, they worked in near silence, Ravner digesting the historical material while Olivia sorted through Marcus's ongoing intelligence from inside the gallery. They created a database linking specific artworks to documentation proving their fraudulent provenance or authenticity. The scale is staggering, Ravner finally said. Museums, private collectors, even sovereign wealth funds have purchased forgeries. The lawsuits alone will take decades. On the third day, Ravna received an encrypted message from his research team. Mason's moving faster than anticipated. 3 major pieces were quietly sold last week to an overseas buyer. He's booked a private medical facility in Geneva for Vanessa's delivery next month. Then we accelerate, Olivia decided. How quickly can you publish? With this level of evidence? 2 weeks for the initial exposé, followed by coordinated releases to international outlets. Ravna's eyes gleamed with professional excitement. We'll need to alert law enforcement before publication. Olivia hesitated, thinking of the innocent people caught in the crossfire. Artists, gallery employees, clients who trusted the Westfield. Name. We protect the unknowing participants, she insisted. This is about the deliberate fraud, not those who were deceived. Ravna nodded. That's what separates good journalism from a vendetta. As he departed, promising to return with legal counsel before publication, Olivia stood on the cabin porch, watching his vehicle disappear down the mountain. 6 weeks ago, she had arrived broken and betrayed. Now she stood straight-backed, purpose, radiating from her like heat. Ruth joined her, offering a mug of tea. You've made your choice, then. Not a choice, Olivia corrected, a responsibility to truth. The older woman smiled. Eleanor would say the same. The Boston Globe's headline was deliberately understated. Art authentication questions arise at prominent gallery. It was the accompanying photographs, Olivia's photographs, that detonated like bombs across the art world. Side-by-side comparisons of supposed ancient artifacts with telltale modern manufacturing marks, X-ray images revealing contemporary materials beneath allegedly century-old paintings, Mason Westfield's signature on provenance documents for pieces that, according to Eleanor's meticulous records, had entirely different origins. By midnight, the story had gone global. The New York Times, The Guardian, Le Monde, all running variations with additional details from Ravna's coordinated release. Art forums exploded with collectors frantically checking their Westfield-sourced acquisitions. 3 major museums announced emergency authentication reviews of their collections. Olivia watched from the cabin, refreshing news sites on her tablet. Ravna's periodic updates arriving via encrypted messages. The FBI had executed search warrants at the gallery and Westfield residences simultaneously with publication. Computers seized, documents secured. Mason was reportedly cooperating with authorities. Damage control, Ruth observed. He'll claim ignorance, blame subordinates. She was right. By morning, Mason's hastily arranged press conference portrayed him as shocked and devastated by discovering fraud within his family's business. He positioned himself as another victim, vowing full cooperation with investigators. Then came the statement that made Olivia's blood freeze. These false allegations are particularly painful, coming while my wife remains missing, Mason told reporters, his expression perfectly calibrated to convey concern. Olivia's disappearance during the February blizzard, combined with her history of emotional instability, has been devastating. I fear these baseless accusations may be connected to her fragile mental state. The satellite phone rang almost immediately. Ravna, voice tight with urgency. He's setting you up as the scapegoat. We need to counter this narrative now. How? Olivia asked, mind racing. Come back publicly. Present your evidence personally. Show the world you're not unstable, you're the whistleblower. After ending the call, Olivia stood at the cabin window, watching late spring snow dust the pines. The safe anonymity of the mountains beckoned. She could remain here, let Ravna handle the public battle, avoid becoming the story herself. Eleanor's photograph, the one of her receiving a Pulitzer for exposing government corruption, stared back from the wall. What would you do? Olivia whispered to her great-aunt's image. Ruth appeared beside her, reading her thoughts. She would walk straight into the storm, the older woman said simply. Head high, cameras ready. Olivia nodded, decision made. Then, so will I. Boston in late April greeted Olivia with a gentle rain that blurred the edges of familiar landmarks. The city she had fled 2 months earlier looked unchanged, yet everything about her perception had shifted. Buildings that once represented success and status now seemed like elaborate facades, beautiful shells concealing questionable foundations. Michael Ravner had arranged a press conference at the Langford Hotel, deliberately choosing neutral territory, rather than a media outlet that might be perceived as having an agenda. As their car approached, Olivia glimpsed the crowd gathered outside. Journalists, cameras, curious onlookers. News of her return had leaked, as planned. "Remember," Ravner said, "stick to facts. Your personal story matters, but the evidence is what will destroy his counter-narrative." Olivia nodded, fingers tracing the outline of Eleanor's jade pendant beneath her blouse. She had dressed with careful consideration, a structured charcoal suit that conveyed seriousness without severity, her hair pulled back in a simple style that emphasized her clear eyes and composed expression. Nothing about her appearance suggested the emotional instability Mason had claimed. Ruth had remained at the cabin, safeguarding the original documents, but had pressed something into Olivia's hand before departure. A small, worn leather case containing one of Eleanor's press credentials from the 1970s. "Carry her with you," the older woman had said. Now, as Olivia stepped from the car into a barrage of shouted questions and flashing cameras, she felt a strange calm descend. This wasn't just about Mason anymore, or even the Westfield fraud. This was about truth, about using her voice, her inheritance, to illuminate what others had tried to keep hidden. Inside the hotel's conference room, she was surprised to find familiar faces. Diane sat in the front row, offering a supportive nod. Marcus, the gallery assistant who had provided crucial evidence, stood nervously against a wall. Most unexpected was the presence of Vanessa, Mason's pregnant mistress, seated near the back, her expression unreadable. At precisely noon, Ravner approached the podium, introducing Olivia with professional brevity. Then it was her turn. Camera. Shutters clicked frantically as she took her position, placed her prepared statement on the lectern, and looked directly into the forest of lenses. "My name is Olivia Chen." She began with her maiden name deliberately. 2 months ago, I was forced from my home during a blizzard after discovering that my husband, Mason Westfield, had been engaged in systematic art fraud, continuing a practice established by his father and grandfather before him. Her voice remained steady as she outlined the evidence. Eleanor's decades of documentation, the contemporary proof gathered by Marcus, the patterns of forgery and misrepresentation spanning generations. "This is not about a marital dispute or personal revenge," she emphasized. "This is about accountability for a massive deception that has undermined the integrity of museums, private collections, and the art world at large." She methodically dismantled Mason's claims about her mental state, presenting medical records, confirming her stability and testimony from professionals who had worked with her. "The suggestion that I am unstable is a desperate attempt to discredit evidence that Mr. Westfield cannot otherwise refute." Questions came rapid fire when she finished her statement. She fielded them with composed precision, directing queries about technical details to Ravner or to the art authentication experts they had brought to support their claims. 20 minutes into the press conference, a commotion at the back of the room drew all eyes. Mason Westfield, flanked by attorneys, made his entrance, clearly intended to catch her off guard. The room fell silent as he strode confidently toward the front, his expression a perfect blend of concern and disappointment. He looked more polished than ever in a bespoke suit, the very picture of an upstanding businessman wrongfully accused. "Olivia," he said, his voice carrying perfectly without a microphone, "I'm relieved to see you're safe. We've all been so worried." She met his gaze steadily, recognizing the performance for what it was. This was Mason in his element, commanding a room, shaping perceptions, rewriting reality through sheer force of presence. "Mr. Westfield," she responded, deliberately formal, "would you care to address the evidence presented regarding the fraudulent provenance of the Han Dynasty ceramics sold to the Phillips collection last year?" His smile flickered almost imperceptibly. "I'm happy to address all allegations through proper channels. Right now, I'm concerned about my wife's well-being after her ordeal." "I'm not your wife anymore," Olivia stated clearly. "The divorce you initiated was finalized 3 weeks ago. Your attorneys accepted service at your office." This caught him off guard. He hadn't expected her to know about the expedited divorce he'd pushed through, leveraging her absence to gain favorable terms. "And I'm not having an ordeal," she continued. "I've been documenting criminal activity from a property that belongs to my family. A property you attempted to locate and acquire for years because you suspected what it contained." She gestured to an assistant who began distributing packets to journalists. "These are copies of communications showing Mr. Westfield's repeated attempts to identify and purchase my great-aunt's property, beginning 2 years before he and I met." Mason's facade cracked further, anger flashing in his eyes. "These are business matters being deliberately misconstrued." "Were you aware," Olivia interrupted, "that Eleanor Chen was a photojournalist who specialized in documenting art world corruption? That she had been tracking your family's activities since 1968? Is that why you pursued a relationship with her great-niece?" The question hung in the air like a thunderclap. Camera shutters went wild, capturing Mason's momentary loss of composure. His attorney stepped forward, placing a restraining hand on Mason's arm. "Mr. Westfield won't be answering unfounded questions. We're prepared to address legitimate inquiries, but gallery operations through proper legal channels." But the damage was done. The narrative had shifted irreversibly. No longer was this about a missing, unstable wife. This was about calculated deception spanning decades, possibly including Mason's marriage itself. From the back of the room, movement caught Olivia's attention. Vanessa was standing, one hand supporting her pregnant belly, the other raising a reporter's digital recorder. Her expression had transformed from unreadable to resolute. "I have documentation," Vanessa announced clearly, "of Mr. Westfield instructing me to falsify provenance records for the Nakamura collection. I also have recordings of him discussing plans to leave the country permanently before authorities could complete their investigation." The room erupted. Mason turned, betrayal and fury distorting his handsome features as he stared at the woman carrying his child. Vanessa met his gaze without flinching, then walked deliberately to the front of the room, placing a flash drive. "Before Olivia, I was never just an assistant or a mistress," she said quietly, "for Olivia alone. I was writing a thesis on art market manipulation. He never bothered to check." As security escorted an increasingly agitated Mason from the room at his attorney's insistence, Olivia felt a weight lifting. The confrontation she had anticipated for weeks had unfolded in ways she couldn't have predicted, yet somehow felt inevitable. Ravna leaned close. "We need to get Vanessa's evidence to the FBI immediately." Olivia nodded, watching as Diane moved to Vanessa's side, lawyer's instincts already engaging to protect this unexpected ally. The press conference had become something else entirely, not merely exposure, but the beginning of justice. Outside, spring rain continued to fall, washing winter's last remnants from Boston's streets, cleansing, renewing, revealing what had been hidden beneath the surface all along. Autumn painted Vermont's mountains in fiery splendor as Olivia stood on the cabin porch, camera raised to capture the golden hour light filtering through russet leaves. 6 months had passed since the press conference that upended the art world and brought the Westfield empire crashing down. The legal aftermath had unfolded with the inexorable gravity of a long-awaited reckoning. Mason now awaited trial on 47 counts of fraud, tax evasion and money laundering. His attempts to flee the country had been thwarted by an alert at a private airfield, the authorities having been warned by Vanessa's evidence. Most of the Westfield assets were frozen, held in trust for eventual restitution to defrauded clients and institutions. The cabin had become Olivia's sanctuary during the storm of depositions, interviews, and legal proceedings. Here, surrounded by Eleanor's legacy, she had gradually transformed her relationship with both her past and future. "Package from Boston," Ruth announced, emerging from her truck with a large flat parcel. The older woman had officially stayed on as caretaker, though their relationship had evolved into something closer to family. Olivia set down her camera and took the delivery, the first prints from her new collection. She unwrapped them carefully. On the porch table, revealing stark black and white photographs documenting the dismantling of the Westfield Gallery. Empty pedestals, vacant display cases, tape marking where forgeries had once hung. The final image showed Mason being escorted from the building by federal agents, his face averted from cameras, shoulders hunched in defeat. "Powerful work," Ruth observed, studying the compositions. "You've captured the emptiness behind the illusion." This series, titled Provenance, had already attracted attention from serious galleries, not because of the scandal, though that certainly hadn't hurt, but because of their artistic merit. Olivia had reclaimed her eye, her perspective, her voice. Her phone chimed with a message from Diane. Judge approved the settlement. Foundation paperwork complete. "We're official." Olivia smiled, showing Ruth the screen. After extensive consultation with attorneys, museums, and art experts, she had made a decision that would have pleased Eleanor. The substantial settlement she received from the divorce and legal proceedings wasn't going toward a new life of luxury. Instead, it had funded the Chen Blackwood Foundation for Artistic Integrity, a non-profit dedicated to authentication research, supporting ethical emerging artists and investigating art world fraud. Ruth would serve as the Foundation's first director, her lifetime of vigilance finally recognized professionally. Marcus had accepted the role of authentication specialist, his courage in providing evidence against his employer, earning him respect throughout the industry. Most surprising was Vanessa's involvement. After delivering a healthy baby girl, whom she named Eleanor, a coincidence that still made Olivia smile, Vanessa had completed her thesis on art market manipulation, now expanded into a book contract. She would serve as the Foundation's research director, her intimate knowledge of fraudulent practices providing invaluable insight. "The first exhibition opens next month," Olivia reminded Ruth. "We should finalize the selections this week." The exhibition, hidden in plain sight, Eleanor Chen's 6 decades of witness, would introduce her great-aunt's work to the world for the first time, showcasing not just the Westfield documentation, but her groundbreaking photojournalism across multiple eras. After Ruth returned to her afternoon chores, Olivia walked the now familiar path to Eleanor's darkroom. The space had been modernized slightly. Solar panels providing reliable electricity, digital equipment complementing the traditional, a satellite internet connection linking this mountain sanctuary to the wider world. But the spirit remained unchanged, a place of truth-seeking, of bearing witness, of making visible what others sought to conceal. On the wall hung a new edition, yesterday's Boston Globe feature about the upcoming exhibition. The article included an interview where Olivia had finally addressed the personal dimension of the scandal. "Did you know from the beginning," the interviewer had asked, "that he married you because of your family connection?" "I believe Mason," "Initially pursued me for calculated reasons," she had answered carefully. "But relationships are complex. There were genuine moments amid the deception. The tragedy isn't that he never loved me. It's that he couldn't separate that love from his need to protect family secrets. Do you regret exposing him?" "I regret that exposure was necessary. I regret the pain caused to innocent people caught in the fallout. But I don't regret choosing truth, however difficult." The question that had lingered with her, that she still contemplated during quiet moments on the mountain, was one the journalist hadn't asked. Would she have married Mason if she'd known everything from the beginning? The answer remained elusive, complexities of love and betrayal defying simple resolution. Her phone rang. Michael Ravner, whose investigative series on the Westfield fraud had earned him a Pulitzer nomination. "Just checking the exhibition timeline," he said after pleasantries. "The documentary filmmakers want to coordinate their release." The documentary, The Photographer's Niece, would premiere at Sundance, telling the intertwined stories of Eleanor and Olivia, two women whose cameras had exposed corruption generations apart. "We're on schedule," Olivia confirmed. "The foundation launch will coincide with opening night." After they hung up, Olivia returned to the porch, watching the afternoon light shift across the clearing. The cabin had been transformed too, winterized. Properly, modestly expanded, yet maintaining its essential character. Just as she had been transformed, still recognizably herself, but stronger, clearer, more intentional in her choices. A car appeared on the winding access road, Diane arriving. For the weekend, to finalize foundation paperwork. Soon the cabin would be full of voices, collaboration, purpose. The isolation that had initially felt like exile now served as the foundation for community. Later that evening, with legal documents signed and dinner cleared away, Olivia excused herself for a solitary walk. The autumn air carried the scent of wood smoke and fallen leaves as she climbed to a small clearing where Eleanor had often set up her tripod. The view stretched across valleys to distant peaks, the world vast and intricate, both transparent and mysterious through her lens. She raised her camera, focusing on the interplay of shadow and illumination as the day's final light gilded the landscape. In that moment of perfect clarity, Olivia understood what Eleanor had discovered decades earlier, that a photograph was both evidence and art, documentation and interpretation, a record of what was and a vision of what could be seen. The inheritance that had saved her wasn't just the cabin or Eleanor's archives or even the truth about Mason. It was this gift of seeing clearly, of finding beauty and meaning even in darkness, of transforming passive witness into active creation. As light faded from the sky, Olivia continued shooting, capturing the transition from day to night. Not an ending, but a threshold, just as the cabin had not been an ending for her, but a beginning. Not an escape, but a return to her truest self. Winter would come again to these mountains, snow blanketing the world in pristine white. But this time she would be prepared. This time she would be home. 1 year to the day after being forced from her home during a blizzard, Olivia stood in the center of the Lumiere Gallery in Manhattan, surrounded by the fruits of transformation. The exhibition opening had drawn an impressive crowd. Museum curators, critics, collectors and photographers, all eager to witness Eleanor Chen's posthumous debut alongside her great-niece's Renaissance. The gallery space had been designed as a dialogue between two women, separated by generations, but united by vision. One wall featured Eleanor's groundbreaking photojournalism, civil rights marches, Vietnam, Watergate, meticulously preserved images that had never before been publicly attributed to her. The opposite wall displayed Olivia's new work, striking, Compositions documenting the dismantling of the Westfield Gallery, the exposure of forgeries, and most powerfully, the renovation of the mountain cabin from refuge to creative headquarters. "It's extraordinary," Diane said, appearing at Olivia's side with 2 champagne flutes, "both the work and what it represents." Olivia accepted the glass, taking in the scene with a photographic eye. Ruth moved among the guests, surprisingly at ease in her role as foundation director despite her preference for mountain solitude. Marcus guided a group of authentication experts through the technical exhibition section, explaining the visual markers of fraud that Eleanor had documented, decades before modern technology could verify them. Vanessa, elegant in a simple black dress, baby Eleanor strapped to her chest in a stylish carrier, spoke animatedly with the documentary filmmaker. "I never imagined this outcome," Olivia admitted, gesturing to the unlikely community that had formed from the wreckage of deception. "No one could have," Diane agreed, "which makes it all the more remarkable." They were interrupted by the gallery owner announcing the formal remarks. As applause died down, Olivia moved to the small podium, surveying the attentive faces before her. "A photographer learns to see what others miss," she began. "My great-aunt Eleanor Chen understood this as both gift and responsibility. She documented truth in an era when women were rarely allowed in the rooms where power operated, much less permitted to expose its corruption. Her work remained anonymous by necessity, but its impact was nonetheless profound." She gestured toward Eleanor's photographs. "These images didn't just record moments in history, they helped change that history by revealing what some preferred. Hidden. Eleanor never received public recognition during her lifetime, but she wasn't seeking fame. She was seeking impact." Olivia paused, gathering her thoughts. "A year ago, I found myself stranded in a snowstorm, betrayed by the man I had loved, cut off from the life I had known. What seemed like catastrophe was actually the beginning of clarity. The cabin that sheltered me contained not just Eleanor's work, but her ethos, the understanding that seeing clearly is the first step toward meaningful change." The crowd listened with rapt attention as she continued. "The Chen Blackwood Foundation emerges from this understanding. Our mission extends beyond exposing art world fraud to fostering a culture of integrity and authentication. We believe that art's power lies in its truthfulness, whether that truth is emotional, aesthetic, or factual." After concluding remarks and enthusiastic applause, Olivia circulated among guests, answering questions about techniques and inspiration. Critics praised the exhibition's conceptual strength. Collectors inquired about acquiring prints. The event was, by any measure, a triumph, yet amid the success, a more personal conversation awaited. In a quiet corner of the gallery, partly obscured by a structural column, Mason Westfield's elderly father, Richard, sat in a wheelchair. His request to attend, delivered through his nurse with assurances that he understood if he was unwelcome, had surprised Olivia. After consideration, she had approved it, now approaching the frail figure of the man whose corrupt practices had preceded and shaped his sons. Olivia felt an unexpected calm. "Ms. Chen," Richard acknowledged, voice reedy with age, "thank you for allowing me to be here." "Mr. Westfield," she replied, taking the seat beside him, "I admit I was curious about your request." His gnarled hands rested on a leather portfolio in his lap. "I came to return something that belongs to your family." He opened the portfolio, revealing a set of photographs. Vintage prints she recognized immediately as Eleanor's work. "I acquired these improperly many years ago, hoping to suppress them. They document my earliest ventures into questionable acquisitions." Olivia studied the images, a younger Richard Westfield meeting with known art thieves, examining clearly stolen artifacts. "Eleanor confronted me directly in 1972, he continued. The only photographer who ever did. She had evidence that could have ended everything. But instead of publishing it immediately, she gave me an opportunity to cease operations and make restitution. His expression clouded with regret. I promised compliance, then simply became more careful, creating the structures Mason would later inherit and expand. "Why tell me this now?" Olivia asked. "Because you succeeded where Eleanor ultimately chose. Restraint. And because I need you to understand, Mason became what I shaped him to be." Richard's eyes, faded with age but still sharp with intelligence, met hers directly. The corruption was his inheritance. His betrayal of you was, in many ways, my legacy. He carefully transferred the portfolio to her hands. "These belong in your foundation's archives. Perhaps they'll help prevent another family from following our path." After he was wheeled away by his nurse, Olivia remained seated, processing this unexpected epilogue to Eleanor's story. The photographs represented both failure and possibility. Eleanor's restraint had allowed corruption to continue, yet here was Richard, decades later, making a gesture toward accountability, however insufficient. Later that night, long after the opening had concluded, Olivia returned to the small apartment she had purchased in the city, a modest pied-à-terre that complemented her primary residence at the cabin. She placed Richard's portfolio on her desk, planning to examine the images properly in daylight. On her balcony, she took in the city lights spread below, so different from the mountain darkness she had grown to appreciate. Both had their place now in her reconstructed life, the wilderness that had sheltered her, and the urban energy that challenged her. Her phone chimed with a message from Ruth. "Snow starting here. First real storm of the season. Cabin secure and waiting for your return." Olivia smiled, remembering that terrible night a year ago when snow had seemed an enemy, when being forced from home had felt like an ending rather than a beginning. Now, winter's approach carried different associations, the beauty of quietude, the promise of renewal beneath the surface. The exhibition would continue for 6 weeks before traveling to museums in 3 countries. The Foundation was reviewing applications for its first authentication grants. Her second photography book was nearly complete. Life had acquired a momentum that felt both purposeful and authentic. As she prepared for bed, Olivia paused before the single photograph she had hung in this city space, not one of Eleanor's historic images or her own acclaimed work, but a simple shot of the cabin at dawn, light breaking over mountains that had witnessed both her despair and rebirth. The inheritance that had saved her had proven to be far more than a physical shelter. It was a lineage of seeing truth and having the courage to capture it, a legacy that had transformed catastrophe into calling, isolation into purpose, betrayal into the foundation for a life more genuine than the one that had been taken from her. Tomorrow, she would fly back to Vermont, to the place that had once represented her most desperate hour, and now stood as the center of her most meaningful work. The storm that had nearly destroyed her had, in the end, blown her home.